Welcome to another chapter podcast with your hosts, Claire and Rebecca.
Do you love books? Well, you've come to the right place. Join us as we discuss all things books.
Welcome to Season 2, Chapter 3 of Another Chapter, the podcast. This week we caught up with Chloe, who is a well-known bookstagrammer and goes by the name of Nurse Fancy Pants on Instagram. Rebecca, what did you make of our chat?
Oh, it was so enjoyable. So enjoyable. It felt much more like a chat than an interview. I suppose both of us have met Chloe in person before, and we would interact with her on Instagram a bit. So, that probably did help. But it was very enjoyable. She is as enthusiastic as us about books,
if not more,
and is a much is a much more established blogger and bookstagrammer than either of us.
Mm-hmm.
I think she said, was it 2012 was when she set up her account?
Yeah.
Before, I'd say, the vast majority of us even probably had Instagram.
Yeah.
She was
ahead
posting
of
about books on Instagram. Yeah, absolutely. And, I think for a lot of people, she is an account that people look up to or, look forward to checking out between the book content, the lifestyle content, whatever it is she chooses to share with us, that people really enjoy her content in general. And yeah, I really enjoyed the chats about the books with her.
Literally, like the three of us, well, apart from you, Rebecca, but the three of myself and Chloe had cups of tea.
Oh yeah,
Rebecca was regretting her decision not to have a cup of tea. But we were just sitting down chatting about books, and it was like literally just going for a cup of tea and talking about what we've been reading and stuff.
Yeah, like we were all in the same sitting room.
Yeah,
having the crack.
I particularly enjoyed listening to Chloe talk about the book that had an influence on her, and it's one that I definitely would like to pick up. It sounds like something that we could all learn an awful lot from.
I really enjoyed Chloe speaking about, I suppose, the content that she posts. So, like, she started out as a beauty blogger in kind of the OG days of Beaut.ie, and how she's transitioned into Bookstagram, like deliberately so. But that she also incorporates things like, finding gratitude in her day with her tiny joys.
Love that.
And her nice things, and how, we have to actively seek out good in our day to make sure that we are focusing on the positive and not the negative. So,
yes, which links in nicely to
exactly the book that influenced her. Yeah, so like she has loads of recommendations, loads of books she enjoys. There is going to be a whole list in the show notes for people to take inspiration from. Yeah, so we hope you enjoy listening to our chat as much as we enjoyed having the chat. So Chloe is a much-loved bookstagrammer with a following of over 16,000 people. She is an award-nominated blogger, mammy to a beautiful little girl, a nurse, and a full-time promoter of Tiny Joys. So perhaps better known to most of us as Nurse Fancy Pants, we're delighted to have Chloe here to chat about her love of reading and life as a well-known bookstagrammer. So, Chloe, outside of that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself for those who may not know you? And we'd also love to know where your Instagram handle came from.
Oh, that's a good question. Thank you for having me. I'm very pleased to be here. I think you've probably covered all the interesting things about me there. Nurse Fancy Pants actually came about because it was around 2011, 2012, and Ireland was just awash with bloggers. It was a huge thing at the time. And I was really into like Beaut.ie and all, like Cherry Sue and all those kind of pages.
Yeah.
And I had just had to take long-term sick leave from work. And I was kind of like, what the hell am I going to do with myself? How am I going to use my brain? I had gone from like doing 13-hour shifts to being at home. And so I was like, I'll set up a blog, of course, what a great idea. And being someone who enjoys the fancier things in life, people would have said, like, oh, you're a real fancy pants to me before. And I thought it was cute. And I also thought it'd be kind of memorable. And then I decided to throw the nurse in because I thought it was funny. And it somehow has stuck. And it is memorable because now when you say it to people, they're like, oh yeah, I'll have trouble forgetting that. So I'm like, excellent. Although it has nothing to do with books. So it can be a bit tricky sometimes these days. But
Yeah,
still.
no, it was a good strategy for a stay. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you find starting out as a beauty blogger? Like, we're very intrigued in how that, so we know how it kind of started, but what made you transition to books? Like, when did that change come around? Was it a natural thing for you, or did you just...
I just realized there's only so much I could say about beauty stuff because I'm not like naturally gifted with makeup. I just really liked it. And so I was kind of like, I need to bring something else in here. So it ended up very quickly becoming more of a lifestyle blog anyway. And so I started introducing, I wouldn't even call them book reviews. They were kind of like roundups at the end of the month. I'd be like, these are all the books I read, like a small paragraph in each one. And I actually checked my Instagram because I was kind of thinking to myself, when did I actually start posting on Instagram as well? But it was around the same time. So I set up a blog and an Instagram page around 2012 and used them both interchangeably.
Wow.
And my very first book Instagram post is also from 2012 and it was a Tana French book. But again, it was just like, I'm reading this and I'm enjoying it. And that's about as far as I went. But kind of as time went on, I realized that actually Instagram's a really good mode of writing book reviews because people don't want to read like a huge, big, long blog post on it. And so it's kind of a perfect length. And so I kind of transitioned eventually, maybe like 2016, 2017 to just doing Instagram. And for a long time, I've been doing kind of more lifestyle stuff anyway, less beauty stuff and a lot more books. So it kind of made sense to move fully over to that really. And then I think the last few years I've moved away from more kind of personal stuff as well, because people just seem to prefer the book stuff and a little bit of life stuff thrown in, but not too much. So.
And yeah, I think we both really enjoy like the tiny joys, you know, and I presume that kind of came not from nothing, but like it probably turned into something a lot bigger than what you ever intended it to be, did it?
Yeah, I had actually been doing tiny gratitudes for a while because I'd read loads of stuff about the importance of bringing gratitude into your life. And it's a really cheesy American thing. But I was like, actually, there is something nice when you're having a bad day to think about something you're grateful for in the day. And then last year, after I came out of hospital after having surgery, I had taken a break from doing the nice things that I was, posting pleasant things on the internet.
Yeah.
I'd taken a break for a while and decided to go back to it. So I was kind of trawling the internet looking for nice things to post. And I found these videos of this woman who's a researcher in neuroscience. And she was just really pleasant videos. But she introduced the concept of tiny joys. She was basically saying it's kind of like our brains are programmed to remember all the bad things because from an evolutionary point of view, it's like a warning for us, like, don't go over there, that's bad. Or, that food isn't good or whatever it is. And she's like, we're much less likely to notice the good things. So you kind of have to almost program your brain, oh, that's a nice thing, like whatever it is, a small thing. And she kind of started doing that in her own life and then spread it onto the internet. And I just thought, oh, that's a really good idea. I did share her videos. I didn't steal her idea. I love this woman and what she's saying, and I'll start doing it myself. But it's worked out really nicely because whenever I post them, it kind of instigates other people to do it as well. So then people will tag me in theirs. And I love what other people's ideas of tiny joys are as well. And they can be really small things or else very big things. And, people will always message me and be like, that's not tiny, that's a major joy. So to then clarify and say it's a major joy. But it's just always really interesting seeing other people's ones because it's joy, it's the name. So yeah, it's just, it's definitely a really cheering thing. I
love the tiny joys. Every morning, like one of the first things I'll do if I'm on Instagram, which I usually am, I'll go and look and see if the tiny joys have been uploaded because I'm very much into that as well, like gratitude and all that kind of crack. And it's a habit that you've to build up, but it's a difficult habit to upkeep, I find.
It's particularly hard at the moment. Obviously, there's lots of terrible things going on in the world. But even recently, someone tagged me in it and I was like, oh yeah, tiny joys. I forgot that I used to do that. And then I started noticing myself again. I kind of almost needed the impetus to kind of go and start like really small things, like things I noticed on my walk. I do the same walk every day because I bring my daughter to Montessori. Yeah. And if I don't purposely look out for the things like a really beautiful flower in someone's garden or the swans in the canal or whatever it is, or some new graffiti or something, then like I just won't notice them. My brain won't even look at them and take them in. But if I'm actively looking for them, then and it's nice to share them then too, I think.
It is. And can I ask you, like, okay, so you've got 16,000 followers. Do you feel under pressure to like upkeep the things like the tiny joys and stuff? Like if you, like for me, that's very on brand for you. I think of you, I think of books, I think of tiny joys. Like, do you feel that, happy? Do you feel that that there is pressure on you to be that person, to have that content?
I do think I give out a lot as well. I like that you've had that impression of me. I worry sometimes that people think I'm a bit of a moaner, because every so often I'll just be giving out about
not at all.
Yeah, to be fair.
So that's nice to hear that. I do sometimes, like I've taken breaks from doing the nice things and from doing tiny joys and stuff, and I will get messages from people being like, no pressure at all. I know you've got a good reason for not doing them right now, but I just really miss them. And I'll be like, oh, I'm so sorry. But I really enjoy doing them too, because starting your day off like that, it can only be a good thing. And it definitely puts a different perspective on things. Like I think it's really easy to see everything as being very gloomy. But when you see, most of the time it's just people being good. And that's always, a positive thing to see first thing in the morning. So hopefully we'll get back to them soon. Yeah. It's just hard at the moment to actively go looking for nice things on the internet because there's so few.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Even though I think probably now people need them more than ever, we'll get there.
Yeah. That's fair. And just in terms of kind of while we're talking about things that have big, small impacts on you, like, is there any particular book that has had kind of a big impact on your life, and why, if yes?
There's probably loads of them. I reread Little Women a lot when I was a child. And I always felt like it was kind of a mirror of my own family without the cozy American vibes to it, because I have sisters and there's 4 sisters in the book. So I suppose that probably definitely there's a lot of there's good vibes in that book. I suppose it was nice to read as a child, but like on a completely opposite scale to that, about like maybe 15 years ago, I read a book called The Gift of Fear, which sounds like a terrible book to read, but it's definitely impacted my life in the sense of it's actively changed how I behave.
Oh, wow.
It's written by international security expert called Gavin de Becker, and he was on Oprah's show in the 90s. And then this book blew up because Oprah promoted it. But it's basically him talking about like trusting your instincts and, not being afraid to look foolish in a situation where you're like, oh, I don't want to look rude. I want to be polite. And he's like, women are trained from childhood to do that. And this whole book is just him kind of untraining you. And since then, I basically don't give directions to anyone. It's probably not a good thing in some ways, but that's been one that's definitely affected me. And I suppose it's made me much more confident as well to kind of put myself first in a lot of situations, which I might not have done before.
That sounds really interesting.
That's huge.
I recommend it to people all the time. It's one of those books I think everyone should read as a teenager, especially like young women. Because when I read it, it was like a light bulb going off. I was like, oh, okay. And like he interviews loads of people in it who've been in violent attacks and stuff, which is awful, obviously, but pinpointing every single case where someone's instinct kicked in and where they didn't listen to it because of that socialization, especially for women,
Wow.
It's not victim blaming in any way. Like he's very much like, this is totally understandable that this is what people do. It's human nature.
Yeah.
But, I'm trying to help you change that and kind of protect yourself and be safer, which is a good thing for sure.
That sounds fascinating.
It really is.
I'm very intrigued.
I'm really concerned now I've said this. I'd say it's about 15 years. I've no idea if it's really problematic now. So I'm probably going to write into your podcast and be like, oh my gosh.
It's okay. You've added the disclaimer now, so it's fine.
Yeah.
We're covered.
And so, like, in general, it sounds like you were a pretty big reader, as a child, so.
Yeah. Like I always say, the best thing my parents did was get us all library cards. And like I had one before I could read. I really distinctly remember going to the library in Limerick and like picking out picture books and going from there, and then going through like each specific age category in the library as I grew older, and reading everything. Like there was nothing I didn't read. And you know, like we were pretty limited in the 90s when you think about it, especially for YA and stuff like that. Like reading Stephen King means it's like there's nothing else to read, so it's going to have to be Stephen King. Which explains a lot, to be honest, about why I'm so creepy now. But yeah, like I probably read all the same stuff everyone else read, like all the Roald Dahl stuff and Harriet the Spy and Anne of Green Gables and all that kind of stuff. So I was always a big reader. Read a lot in my teens. When I was in my 20s and I finally got money, I started working, I just started building my own library. So I still have most of those books now. And to this day, still buying books that I don't need.
Yeah. Still, the amount of books we own in comparison to the amount of books we don't own is relatively little. I saw that somewhere this evening and I was like, that's a good way to look at it.
What makes me feel better?
That's quite real.
And is there any like particular genre that would be, you know, a favourite, a go-to that you would kind of automatically pick up?
Oh, thrillers, I'd say. Like I bounce a lot between literary fiction and then thrillers, and I kind of like go between the two. Like I'll pick a really trashy thriller as a palate cleanser after reading something really impressive and a bit pretentious, and I'll be like, okay, no, I need to read something super trashy now. And so I'll pick something like, I love Grady Hendrix writes kind of really trashy horror stuff, and Riley Sager as well, just that kind of like hilariously funny, not meant to be twists for out loud to myself, but they're really enjoyable. And sometimes I think that's really necessary too. Like you can't be reading Pulitzer Prize or Booker nominees all the time. I think you need to have a bit of levity in there as well.
Yeah, my brain would not function.
Ours was read when I was younger too. So it's nice little kind of memory lane in some ways because they feel very similar.
Yeah.
With those kind of
that.
You know,
and is there any particular author that would be an auto by then?
Oh, I have a few, I think, because I'm a huge Stephen King fan, so I'll read pretty much anything he writes, bar his fantasy books, because I just don't really read fantasy at all. I love Marion Keyes and Emily St. John Mandel. I absolutely love her books. Station 11, The Glass Hotel, and Sea of Tranquility were like three of my favourite books of the last 5 years. Wow. So anything she writes, pretty much, I will read, for sure.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
That's kind of a Marmite book, isn't it? Station 11.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I force everyone I know to read that. And I've had a few people come back and be like, I see, we can be family/friends.
Yeah, I read it a long time ago. Yeah. No, and I remember then when I joined Bookstagram and people were raving about Station 11 and I was like, I should not be here because I did not get what the big deal was. Now, it was a long time ago when I read it, so maybe I've kind of matured in my reading abilities.
I think dystopia is a really difficult genre. You know, I tend to gravitate towards that anyway, again with the creepiness. But I think lots of people just don't like that, and that's completely valid because it's not particularly pleasant reading.
Yeah, I think I quite enjoyed Station 11 actually, and I read a few other kind of similar books at the time, and I think the issue be in the sense that why people maybe don't like them is that they kind of tap into fears that people maybe don't know they have, or you know, worries, kind of anxieties about what could potentially happen, because they are not totally unrealistic situations in the sense of like worst case scenario in, you know, the future or whatever.
Especially I think the ones that are more believable, like a weird virus has taken over or something like that.
I know.
Why am I reading this? When we were in New York, I started reading a book. I read it. I know I said I started reading it. Called Severance, and nothing to do with the TV show. And it's basically about a woman ending up being the last person in New York after this awful virus outbreak.
Oh my God.
And she's the last woman living in New York and working. She keeps going to work in her office building on her own. And it's really, really weird. Walking around New York and listening to it on audio. And she's describing places I'm walking around in, and it was really, really creepy, but it was a great experience for reading a book as well. It was kind of cool.
That's good. That's really cool. But also very weird. If I was the last person left, I don't think I'd be going into work.
Oh, definitely not. You know, kind of losing it as the book was going on, because I was like, Carl, what are you doing? Like, you shouldn't be here. Anyway, this is crazy. But
And
yeah, it's
So you spent a bit of time living in New York. How
yeah, just a
did
year, but I was there
yeah?
for a decade.
How did it, no, but like, did it impact your reading habits? Like, do you know, did you read different books because of where you were living and stuff? Or do you know how people will see different recommendations based on where they're at and stuff?
I think because I joined the New York Public Library and they have like an absolute cracking section. They use Libby. And like, I remember when I downloaded it, I was just like, so many books. There's just so many new releases and really interesting
Yeah.
books, and like really diversified my reading. It was a great year for reading from that perspective, but I couldn't actually access physical books in the library because they were all closed because of COVID times. That was
Of
definitely
course, yeah.
so I ended up, I remember one day just going into a Barnes and Noble because there was no other bookshops open. Everywhere else had closed. All the independent bookshops were closed. And I just think like, I just need to have physical books in my apartment. I just went in and bought like 6 books and spent an absolute fortune. But I was like, books. I have the books now. It's fine. But yeah, I think having access to such a huge variety of books was just amazing. Like they really just have such an incredible selection. And I read some really interesting ones. None particularly New York specific, I don't think. Other than The Only Plane in the Sky, which is a book about 9/11, which was absolutely devastating,
Yes.
but
Oh,
a pretty
wow.
brilliant audio book. It's narrated incredibly well. And I picked that up on audio after we went to the Ground Zero Museum Memorial. And they had it in the gift shop, but I had already seen online that it was a better audio one, so I ended up
Okay.
just getting it for that. But it really
Yeah.
sticks in my mind from that time because I suppose having been and seen all the stuff in the museum, which was obviously very emotional, and then listening to the book, it was just spent about like 3 days just sobbing, which was like
Yeah.
obviously
my
not
God.
great, but an incredible book. It's
God.
And would you say that that is like the book that reminds you most of New York or being in New York, or is there anything else or any other one?
Oh. Like I read loads of books that I think of now when I think of New York because like we weren't taking public transport at all because of COVID. So like I used to just go everywhere, walk everywhere, and I always had Fia with me. So if I was bringing her anywhere, we would just end up walking like blocks and blocks. And obviously it was just like prime opportunity to listen to audiobooks. So I just listened to so many books while we were there. Like I remember listening to My Dark Vanessa when I was there. Just a book I just don't think I'll ever get out of my brain. Such an upsetting book. I listened to actually Station 11 and the Glass Hotel when I was there as well. So they feel very New Yorky as well to me. But yeah, no, it's probably the 9/11 one because it feels so particular to New York, and the book focuses so much on kind of the strength of New Yorkers as well. So it felt like a really nice book from that perspective to read while I was there, because New Yorkers are great for the most part. So it was nice to read that.
Very good.
Like fair play to you for living there for a year.
I couldn't afford to live in New York long term. That's the thing. When we were moving home, the amount of messages I got on Instagram, people being like, "You're absolutely crazy. Why would you move back to Ireland when you could stay in New York?" And I was like, "Do you want to pay my rent?" It's like we got a huge discount because of COVID, because so many people left the city, so we got a big discount. But even with that, like it's crazy.
And what brought you to New York to begin with? Was it work or?
My husband is, so in order to work in a specialised area of medicine in Ireland, you have to do a year abroad somewhere, bigger centre, so that you can bring back your experience with you. He does infectious diseases in pediatrics. That's pretty specialised. So he had to go work somewhere for a year, and we were like, look, we're doing nothing else here because it's COVID, so we may as well go now, and we're not really missing anything because we can't see people anyway. So I thought she worked out very well, apart from me getting COVID. Apart from that, it was great.
It's funny to think about it in that respect, like to be able to put such a positive spin on it was, COVID was the perfect time to go, because you think the opposite. Like,
oh, for sure. Yeah.
I think we were all glued to your stories because everyone was like living vicariously through you. Yeah,
and it was nice because we could do a lot of touristy things without being tourists, I guess. And there weren't really any tourists there. So it felt like having New York to ourselves a little bit, which was nice. And also it felt a bit like those dystopian books because there was no one on the streets.
Yeah.
And it was like, I think
you never know, there could be a book out of it by you yet.
hadn't thought of that. Now. That's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
I'll have
I
to
was
mention
going to
you in
ask
my.
you, have you ever thought about writing?
I just don't know what I would write, to be honest. Like my husband is always saying, would you not sit down now and write a book?
As you
Oh
do.
yeah, yeah.
I just,
That easy.
and he's always, do a creative writing course. And it's a great idea, but I just still don't know. You know, the way when people are like, everyone has a
Yes.
book in them. I don't know what that book would be. You know, the way people always have an idea or something they're
Yeah.
pulling in their minds. I don't really have that. And then I read books that are so impressively written. And I'm just like, oh yeah, no, that's why I can't write a book. Because it's that. I know my limits.
But then you have your like trashy horror, thriller books.
Yeah, I feel like if I released a trashy horror book that all my fellow bookstagrammers would be like, whoa. I read that. I'm going to be really embarrassed. No one will come to my book launch in August.
We all would.
We'd be there.
Yeah, we'd be there because we're in the acknowledgements.
Yeah.
Speaking of horrors and stuff, can we go and ask you what was the last book that kept you up at night? Was it a horror?
Yeah.
It was thriller actually, because they're usually the ones that I kind of compulsively read. I think that Lisa Jewell one I read last year was one of those. The
Yeah.
None of This
Oh,
is true.
yes. Yeah.
I just couldn't stop listening to that. I found that just like an obsessive listen where I had to finish that. And Stephen King had one out last year as well. I think I've mentioned Stephen King about 6 times now, so apologies for that. I listened to that while we were in France like an idiot. I remember being in bed and being like, no, I have to finish this. I have to listen to the end of this. And like everyone else is asleep in the house. And like a fool, I listened to the end of it. And then was awake for hours just like, I wish I hadn't done that. And then this year, I really enjoyed Breakdown.
Haven't heard of that.
That author. I reviewed it recently. I don't think it's even out yet, or if it is, it's coming out just this month. She's an Irish author. It's her first novel. She's written, I think, a series of short stories previously.
Oh, yes.
Kathy
Yeah.
Sweeney.
Okay.
I recognise the cover now, yeah.
Yeah, I did stay up late enough to finish that. But late for me isn't that late these days. So, yeah, another one where I'm just like, I just really want
Yeah.
to finish this. I need to know she's
Yeah.
okay. You know, when it's so well written, you really want the character to do okay. You just want
Yeah.
to finish it and be like, they're okay, it's fine, I can go to bed.
Oh.
And what is that book about, actually?
It's about a mother who just wakes up one day and leaves her home in Dublin and just
Okay.
leaves. Just decides, like, that's it, I'm done. And it's just about her, I suppose, it's kind of like her breakdown,
Yeah.
but also her rediscovery of herself
Okay.
as she used to leave. The whole book through, you're like, okay, when's she going to go back? There's so much anxiety in it. And it's a real, like constant dread. I'm not selling
Yeah.
this, I know that. I've mentioned dread. No one's going to want to read that book. But it's just so well written. And it deals with so many of those kind of like more
Yeah.
difficult sides of motherhood that people generally don't talk about. I just thought it was so well written and just so timely as well. So I really hope it does well for her because I think it's brilliant.
That sounds great.
And it's a debut novel.
Yeah, so she has, I think, one book of
Okay.
short stories out already. And
Wow.
then this is her first novel.
I'd read that, even though I don't know, 'cause sometimes I kind of take on the emotions of main characters in books and I get very invested.
Yeah.
So
Not super emotional though. It's
Yeah.
weird because it is almost like she's having a breakdown. So she's almost quite kind
Okay.
of quite detached from
Okay.
herself. All actions seem quite bizarre at times, and you're kind of reading it going, "Oh, like she's totally not herself." Like
Yeah.
but you realize it until you're further into the book, and I thought it was brilliant.
Definitely want to check out.
Like I don't know if you were going through a hard time where you were a brand
Yeah.
new mom, it might not be the best because it is
Yeah.
emotional.
I'd give it a couple of months.
Someone said that to me actually after I got Via and I had received Notes to Self, Emmeline Pine as a
Mhm.
gift. Actually, about 4 or 5 people messaged me on Instagram and said,
Okay.
don't read that just
Yeah.
yet. Just hold that one for a while. Oh, okay. And I only just read it last year, just like 4 years later. And it was brilliant. I could totally see what they're saying. So that was a really, really helpful piece of advice.
Yeah, because you said that to me, Rebecca, last year. I
Yeah,
think it was
yeah.
like the push and stuff were on my list, and you were
Yeah.
like, "No, Claire, don't
I'm
go
sure
near
that
it."
was one of the Tired Mammy books.
Yeah.
I'm almost certain that's why I read it, actually. Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, but I definitely remember saying, like,
Yeah.
give it a while. Give it a while.
Yeah, that one's to me out as
Yeah.
well.
I still haven't read it, so I have no idea what happens or anything. But yeah, what are you currently reading, so Chloe?
Unsurprisingly, I'm reading a thriller, which isn't out yet, so I have to double check. It's Stacey Willingham. It's called Only If You're Lucky.
Okay.
Out in a couple of days.
Oh, her books are great, actually.
People love her, and it's the first one I've read of hers. I actually requested to a Mecca because they said it's kind of bad form, but I've not read any of hers yet. And I'm enjoying it. Yeah, I'm hoping to finish it this evening or tomorrow. And I've just started the Tired Mammy Book Club pick as well for February.
Yes.
The Rings and Jennings, so that's good as well. And I always have a few, like that's the thing is that I always have about 5 audiobooks on the go. I always have a Kindle book and I always have a couple of actual hard copies as well, just in case there was any risk of running out of having a book. That I'm at least 6 around me at all times. But yeah, there's a few. I have a terrible library habit as well, where I have my card maxed out at all times from the library, and just panic now because I have 12 books to read by a certain time that I won't get read. I'll have to read them for the next 3 months, and it's just, why do I do this to myself? It was one of my goals to not do this, but I obviously have failed.
And just speaking of the library, actually, yourself and Sinead from Tired Mammy have been very involved with the library, doing, talks at the library and being quite involved with them. Like, how did that come about? And are you enjoying that aspect of your, I suppose, blogging, bookstagramming?
Yeah, I absolutely love doing it. We've done it now for the last couple of years. Basically, we were approached by the library to take part in their Redline Festival, which takes place every autumn. And they were like, they wanted the perspective of someone from, I suppose, the bookstagram side of things, because from their perspective, it was quite new. And I think it's only really in the last few years that it's taken off so much. Mm-hmm. Obviously, people have been reviewing books online for a very long time, but it's become such a community, I think, especially in the last 5 years, that they were like, we should definitely be addressing this as well.
Yeah.
And we were delighted to take part because we both love the library, obviously, and we bang on about the library quite a lot. And I wouldn't be able to read as much as I do if it wasn't for the library. So it just made sense.
Yeah.
I'm always talking to people about it, so why not do an informal setting? And like, we love doing it, and myself and Sinead bounce off each other really well. Like, we're very good friends in real life. So it's basically just transforming our chats in real life into a library, which makes it all the better. It's always really nice because people, when they come to these things, they also love reading, or else they want to read more and they want to know more about it. And we've really got to bang the drum for Bookstagram. I think especially the last one, like someone in the audience asked, like, why should I join Bookstagram? She was like, I like reading the books I read. Why should I join this? Like, sell it to me, basically. Like, well, we've been talking about this for an hour now, so we haven't sold it already. So what else? Well, I was saying, like, you can still read all of the books you want to personally read, but I suppose it's just a way of connecting with other like-minded people. Mm-hmm. It's a very wholesome activity.
Yeah.
There's never any sentiment on Bookstagram because we all just like reading. We all like books, and that's always going to be a positive thing. And the other thing as well, I think, is that it does open your mind up to different books. It does diversify your reading. And even if you just want to read books that you've had on your TBR for 20 years, like, I read Catch 22 last year, and I've had a copy of that since I was 17.
Yeah.
So, like, another aspect of it as well, I think it's great for getting like classics and stuff like that. There's just so many elements. And it's really nice introducing more people to that, because I think, like, the internet can be quite harsh at times, and especially, like, I suppose there's always kind of negativity online as well about some things, but there's not really any of that with Bookstagram. I haven't noticed it anyway. I don't know if you have noticed that at all. But,
no, not really. Yeah.
It just always seems to me like people just enjoy chatting to each other, and it's just nice.
Yeah, I was only saying to Rebecca yesterday that, like, I had my first child during COVID, and the world was in one of our lockdowns anyway. We couldn't go anywhere. And when I'd been looking forward to a time when I'd be going to, like, my mommy and baby groups and everything like that, I had no access to anything like that. And what I found was Bookstagram, and I found my community there. It definitely, it's a lovely, lovely place. So if there's anyone listening to this that would like to join Bookstagram, we would highly encourage you to jump on board.
That's the thing. If someone sent me a message last year and she was kind of saying, oh, I'd love to set up a Bookstagram account or a book reviewing account, but I just don't think I'd feel welcome because I don't read the sort of books that you all read. And I was like, I mean, there isn't a specific type of book that we all read. That's the thing. It's like there's something for everyone, and that's something I love as well, that if people message me and say, I'm looking for romance novels, I don't particularly read a huge amount of romance, but I know lots of people that do, and I can show you their accounts. Or people will say, I love to get YA stuff for my teenager, and I can show you where to go for that too. You know, like there's a huge variety on there as well. That's why I mean, everyone is welcome. And there's something for everyone there too. There's no snobbery around it at all. And you don't have to read any new releases. You can just read whatever you want. And you don't even have to read that much. If you want to read one book a year, that's fine too. It's just the love of reading and the love of books, I think. So
yeah, and you were saying there about that there's a huge variation of genres that people read, and that Bookstagram kind of helps us to broaden our horizons. What kind of genres I know that you've been on Bookstagram way longer time than I have anyway, but is there any genre that you've kind of picked up because of Bookstagram that you've been influenced to read, and one that's maybe surprised you a bit?
I don't think I specifically read outside of the genres I prefer that much, but I think what I do because of Bookstagram is I'll read more books that I might just not have picked up, even if in a genre that I enjoy. Like if I see a review of something, I'd be like, I would never have picked that book up.
Yeah.
But because that person's reviewed it, I'll now go and read it, you know. So I think that's been one of the best things about Bookstagram for me. I've read so many books that I would probably never have even thought of reading. And also from, the book club as well. Lots of there too that I probably wouldn't have considered reading as well. It's definitely broadened my horizons a bit.
Hugely. That's what I love about Sinead's book club too, is that, you want to talk about the book with people. You're drawn to it because of discussing books, but like the variety of books that are read is phenomenal. I think I've read so many books as part of the Tire Mammy book club that I would never, as you say, never have picked up for myself, and I love them.
Yeah, I would never have picked up January's book, for instance, and that's definitely within a genre that I would read. But I just wellness was the book, and I did enjoy it, even though it was hefty.
I didn't read that one.
And another thing too that I love about Bookstagram, I love that, wildly varying opinions people have on books too.
Yeah.
I think that's fantastic. It's just gets you out of your own bubble, I'm definitely one thinking well, I love that book, and hopefully everyone else will love it too. And then people messaging me like, I absolutely hated that book you recommended.
Yeah.
That's fair, but it's good in a lot of ways because it does get you outside of your own frame of thought, I think, as well. It's always a positive thing. So.
What's the one book that you think everyone should read? Is it one of the ones that you've already mentioned?
It's not. And I can recollect this very quickly because I actually posted about this last year, and I asked people for their ideas on this as well. Because I read Vesper, maybe that was the year before actually, Deirdre Finnerty's book. And I was saying on Instagram that I think it's a book everyone should read and it should be in schools. And I asked other people what their thoughts were as well. Yeah. But I probably also include Chanel Miller, My Name as well.
And you could see why they are books that should be read. Do you know, as in with the information that they're kind of coming with? Yeah. Yeah, I can see why you would recommend those ones.
Yeah, just from other people's perspectives, their lived experiences, I think are so important. And especially the Vesper one, I think we're so at risk of forgetting about those women and those girls. And I think as a nation, we definitely need to be keeping their stories alive and making sure that they're not forgotten, But for sure, there's loads of books like that, in fairness, and I'm sure I could think of if I was capable at this time of the evening. Do you guys have any that you...
Yeah, see, we're caught in the hop now. We're like, be asked the question is like, oh no, I can't think. So yeah, I'm thinking now along the non-fiction reads, especially that Fintan O'Toole's one, We Don't Know Ourselves. Just from the, I think he just covers kind of Irish history in such a fantastic way, and in a way that put together kind of I hadn't read before. And I would be quite interested in Irish history, but I really appreciated kind of the no-nonsense-ness of that read. And it, you know, and again, it kind of opens your eyes up to certain aspects of Irish history, or who was involved in certain things or certain events that you kind of maybe didn't know or kind of didn't think of it in that way. So I thought that is something that I would recommend kind of from a non-fiction, especially an Irish non-fiction point of view. Yeah.
As part of a budgie read, you know, Sarah Fully Booked
Yes.
is doing her big book club, and that's March's book. So I'll be reading it.
Excellent.
Looking forward.
I think Take My Hand would be one then that I would recommend. I think that's really important. But what's interesting is all of the books that we're recommending are, as you say, like lived experiences, how people have been mistreated and things have gone under the carpet and kind of people looking the other way.
Yeah.
And it's important for us to read about them, to learn from them, and to hopefully not make those kind of mistakes again.
And yeah, that book was incredible.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. I think it was absolutely fantastic. Very upsetting too, but
The fact that it's
well
based
done. Yeah.
It's devastating as well.
It's interesting, isn't it, how the wording of a question can totally change where you're going with it. Like I suppose the wording of that was like a book you think everyone should read, whereas if that was even worded like a book that you maybe would recommend to people, you might think of it like just a different, you know, your brain would go a different direction with that answer. Like, yeah, so.
Yeah, for
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, you probably, and wouldn't you?
And is there any book from last year that you especially loved, that, be it along those lines or otherwise, like a favourite read?
I loved We All Want Impossible Things. I don't know if either of you read that last year.
I don't think so.
It's, again, a really depressing book. Some books I read are really miserable, but it's also really life-affirming. And it's basically about two female best friends in like their late 40s maybe. And one of them is dying and she's in hospice care and the other friend is looking after her. And it just, it kind of highlights all the good parts of humanity, is how I would describe it. Yeah. I cried, I laughed reading it. I just thought it was beautifully written, but it's definitely a Marmite book. It's really interesting. Like I've had people message me and say, thank you so much for recommending that. I absolutely loved it. What a book. And other people have messaged me and been like, you hated the main character.
Okay.
Don't understand if you liked this. And I've been like, okay, that's fair. I can see why too, because she's not likable. It's a bit of a bugbear with books with female protagonists, that people will not like the book because the character isn't likable. And that doesn't really happen with male protagonists that much.
Good point. Yeah. That's a very good point.
But yeah, I think there is a balance. Or if there's a book that has no likable characters in it, it's very hard to root for anyone. So it can be hard to like that book, to really like get on very well with it. But I think if there's just one main character that you know isn't particularly likable, I can still find something else in the book that I love, you know, or I can see aspects of the character that I like. So I think it very much depends on how it's done and how it's written. But yeah, I really enjoyed that book. I thought it was beautiful.
That's true. I'll have to add that one now. That sounds like
it's not really, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah. We'll lighten it up slightly, so right, because we've had a lot of heavy,
really good books that are positive and cheerful.
Conversation. Can we ask you a couple of questions that? Well, I think we only have about 2 questions, but they're kind of more lighthearted. So our first one is: if you could have dinner with 3 fictional characters, who would they be?
I'm going to go old school. I'm going to go Jo March from Little Women, Lizzie Bennet from Pride and Prejudice, and Anne of Green Gables, because they all love reading. I think they just have a great time chatting. And I could tell them all about modern feminism, and they'd probably all be horrified, but I think it'd be good crack.
That's a nice dinner party.
Worlds that they come from too. So I'd like to find out more about their worlds.
Interesting.
Yeah. That's a very well thought out guest list.
Yeah, they're 3 of my favourite books.
Yeah.
So I think about them and their little worlds a lot. You know, not great times to be women in any of them, actually.
No.
But enjoyable books nonetheless.
I was actually discussing Anne of Green Gables today with my mom, because we were talking about it last night, and myself and Rebecca were talking about it last night, but my mother has never read it. So her mom has read it. My paternal grandmother read it and gave me all of the books to read as I went along and stuff. And my mom was like, I've never read those books.
She's going to read them out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, she said, do you have a copy of it? And I do. And it's like, wait, no, where's my finger in the camera? It's there. But that's my grandmother's edition of the book that I got after she passed away. And I was like, you're just going to have to get it on Kindle, really, Mel.
One.
Yeah. And that's staying here.
You read them series when you were younger?
Yeah, I did. So my dad's mom had a whole collection of the books, and she would read the first one and then pass it down to all of the girls, and we'd all read it. And then we'd kind of talk about it, and then she'd read the second one and pass it along. So it was like a book club, but with only one
Great tradition.
book. Yeah, it was lovely. It was very nice.
It's a beautiful series as well. It's such a gorgeous book. So
yeah,
that's really cool that you've got them as well. So nice. Wait a minute, how did you end up with them?
So that was my dad's mom that did that for us, or with us, I suppose. And then my mother's mother passed away during COVID, and in her book collection there was just this copy of the Anne of Green Gables book.
Okay.
So my mom gave that to me. So I just have the first book of it. But yeah, my aunt, my dad's sister, has my grandmother's whole collection of those. Yeah.
We'd have to sneak in the dead of night now and rob them from our house.
That's it.
I was just trying to think. I was like, God, do I have any books like that from like my grandparents? And I think the two books that I actually took from my grandfather without him ever knowing, kind of intending to read them and pass them back, was The Exorcist and For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Oh.
So yeah, two books that I'm sure I shouldn't have been reading when I was about 10.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, but I still have them. I'm sure they're still here somewhere. I actually had totally forgotten about that. That's even where they came from until right now.
It's nice to have something like that, you know, especially when you're passionate about books anyway, to have something that's been passed on to you.
Yeah, well, inadvertently passed on.
You anyway, you thief.
Next up, you're reading The Exorcist at 10. That's so funny.
Well, I surely was a bit older than that. Actually, I don't know because he passed away when I was relatively young. So
it's about for anything in fairness. So.
Yeah, and I was another like reading Stephen King person at 11. I was actually only saying to Claire last night that I distinctly remember the librarian being like, "Are you sure you should be reading this?" And me going, yeah, it's grand. Like my parents know, and her kind of very reluctantly passing it over, but like her also knowing I had read so much that that's the level I was at that point. So yeah, not to...
Do you find it hard now? People will message me and say things like, "Is that book suitable for my 14-year-old?" And I'll be like, "Oh Jesus, I don't know."
Yeah.
Like, and then I'm like, "Hang on, what was I reading at that age?" But I think that's very much of an individual parent kind of thing to decide.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what I want my child reading Stephen King at that age.
Yeah.
But
I definitely, like, one of the things, like, having reread certain books since, there are definitely elements of the books that were not age appropriate, but that I have no recollection of. Like, so I'd say just maybe I didn't
100%.
understand the bits that were beyond my level of capability, especially the more like adult, we'll say, aspects of it. Like, I definitely do not remember certain things or even being confused about them. So I'd say just totally went over my head.
Went right over your head.
Yeah. Thankfully. And if you could live in the world or like realm of any fictional character, whose would it be and why?
Oh, you know what series of books I love for their setting is the Practical Magic books. I just really love them. Like, they're set in New England. One of the women in them has an apothecary shop, but in modern times. They wear 90s clothes. Everything's fine, really. Lots of bad things after those books too, but they do magic spells stuff.
Yeah.
They kill vengeful men. So there's lots of like good things in them, you know. I just really I love those books. I think there's something really comforting about them. Definitely them. Yeah.
That's a good shout.
Yeah. There's one of the books in a series set in Salem, actually, like during the Salem witch trials. So not that book. Skip that one and just the other ones. The one set in yeah.
And our last question for you then, Chloe, is a more serious one again, but what advice would you have for people who want to get into reading or want to read more?
So I'm actually asked this very regularly, and it usually happens every month when I put up my all the books I read that month. I'll usually get a few messages from people being like, how do you read this much? Or I'd love to read more. I'd love to read even a few books more this year than I would have last year. And my answer is always basically something I stole from a magazine a few years ago. But it's something I was doing anyway, so I just kind of stole their wording. But in this article, they were saying, as with any hobby, if you want to do more of it, you have to actively carve out the time for it in your day.
Yeah.
So it was saying like, you know, any downtime at all that you could be using to read, if you want to do that, obviously, you know, you don't have to be a maniac about it or anything. But like let's say in my life anyway, I walk a lot, so I'll always have an audiobook on.
Yeah.
I clean my house a lot, so I'll always have an audiobook on. And then when my daughter's in bed, I'll usually be reading like a print copy. So I'll always have a book with me as well. Like I was at a hospital appointment today, I had a Kindle, I had an audiobook, like I had loads of books, book options there. I'm never without a book, so I'll always have the opportunity to read. I think you just have to find time for it. Like I don't watch that much TV anymore. I just read a lot because I enjoy doing it. It's something I want to focus on and I want to spend more time on. So that's just, I've made the time for it basically.
Yeah.
And I think when people realize that, I think people think I have an abundance of time and they're always like, where do you find that? I don't understand where the time comes from because you have a child and you have to clean your house and you have to do errands and do groceries and all these things. And I'm like, but I do those things and read at the same time because like it's mainly audiobooks, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm always recommending it because it's just revolutionary for reading, I think.
Yeah. If you can get into them at all, they are a game changer. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're not for everyone either. I mean, people do say that to me all the time, that they find them incredibly distracting. Or they can't focus on them. They can't do two things at once or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So that is tricky, but you can still find time in the day to read an ebook, I should say, or a paperback book. And that's something Sinead always talks about as well. Tired Man Me Book Up is taking 30 minutes for yourself every day.
Yes.
And like, I don't think anyone would think badly of someone for taking 30 minutes for themselves just to sit down and do something they enjoy, you know? So
absolutely. I'm just thinking back to my first ever experience of audiobooks. I was doing a post-grad course and it required an awful lot of traveling for day courses around the place. And I remember being like, God, I could be using this time wisely and listening to an audiobook. And at the time, it was just a CD player in the car. And my boyfriend at the time, same person now really, he downloaded one for me, paid for it and downloaded it and put it onto CDs for me or whatever. And I remember I was like, I am going to crash the car. The narrator can make or an audio. I remember like listening to it and just feeling like I was going to doze off because it was the most monotonous voice I've ever come across.
Do you remember what the book was?
Yeah, 1984.
Yeah. A tough one to listen to in the car, I'd say.
Yeah, it didn't hit the spot.
You could make the book monotonous though. Cheapers. That's a real...
Yeah, and I feel like at the moment, I don't think I could go back to it for a very long time because I just remember feeling like I was going to crash the car from listening to it.
You're right, though. The narrator makes such a difference.
Yeah.
Like, when I worked as a midwife, I had a woman in labour and, you know, people can put on music or whatever they want. And she wanted to put on an audiobook. And I was like, this is right up my street. Like, one of the Harry Potter books on audio, narrated by Stephen Fry. And he has such a beautiful voice. I was like, what a perfect choice.
Yeah.
Because it's really soothing for her. She loves the books. He has a great voice. And we were all just sitting there like, fantastic. In my element. Yeah. Really loved it. It was such a good idea.
Oh, I thought there was going to be a twist in this where it was a different narrator or something and it didn't end up very well.
No, Steve. It was great. Yeah.
He has a lovely voice for audiobooks.
Yeah.
Velvety. Yeah.
Good shout on that one. Okay. Before we finish up, you probably know this by now, but we do a quick fire round. Yes, where you get a set of choices and you pick one. Are you up for it?
Yes.
Okay.
Kind of like, did you ever used to watch Blackbird Jungle, the Reed Darcy one?
No.
Yeah. Yeah, do you remember we used to make people do a rapid fire buzz around?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We'll have to get a buzzer, Rebecca.
Do that.
Wrong answer. Send people the buzzer in advance.
Oh, weren't we talking about something before? Another podcaster, Rebecca, and they had like a keyword, and if you mentioned the keyword in the podcast, the episode ended.
Was it?
What was
It was an
that?
author. It was an author who was telling us about it.
Yes, it was.
And it was like,
Sorry, here am I thinking.
Was it like your favourite dishes or something like that?
Yeah, so like
Something to do with
basically, if you
cooking.
said lemon drizzle here, we would have agreed that lemon drizzle was the buzzword, and if you mentioned lemon drizzle, I'd just hang up. That was it. Like you'd be gone. There'd be no
That's
rest of the
Yeah, and
interview.
like it's a pretty well known, like it's definitely a comedian or someone like a relatively
Yeah.
well known name is the presenter, but like the guests know that. I presume they know that there is a word, and if you say the word,
That's
Wow.
not the case here.
that
though,
would be
but-
harsh.
No,
No
well,
one
I'm
would ever
scared.
talk to us again.
So many. I feel like if I say it again, you're both just going to be like, eh. No.
Okay, right. Here we go. Hardback or paperback?
Paperback.
Dust jacket on or off when reading?
Oh, on.
Judge a book by its cover, yes or no?
Yes.
Would you rather never read a new release or never be able to reread a book?
Never be able to reread.
Okay. Series or standalone?
Standalone.
Film adaptation or TV adaptation?
Oh, neither.
Oh,
I rarely watch them, to be honest.
okay.
Yeah.
A popular book you didn't enjoy?
See, this is what I was saying to you. I can't ever think of book ones. I might have to come back to that. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Breaking the spine, a sin or a pleasure?
It's just something I do automatically. I don't really ever notice it. You kind of have to break the spine.
I think so too. And people get an awful lot of slack
Really?
online for breaking the spine of book. But, yeah.
I mean, there's worse things you could be doing in fairness.
Yeah.
So
like someone's actual spine. Right. Read inside or outside?
insight.
Dublin or New York?
Ooh, I immediately thought Dublin. So
Oh, that's good.
I guess Dublin, yeah.
Yeah.
That is good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, you
Imagine
look a bit
in New York,
surprised with that
very-
answer.
You know, I am a bit surprised. New York, you idiot.
There you
No,
go.
I do. In fairness.
That's it. There.
My house is here, so kind of have
That's
to go.
fair.
to-
Yeah.
I don't know if I need to live there. But
Yeah, because we had a chat about the popular book one before you came on. We were like, what would we say
Yeah.
now to that question? And both of us kind of had one straight away that we were both a bit like, about. But yeah, we weren't sure if it was the kind of one that
what book was
something
it
would
you were saying, though,
automatically
just out of interest?
come to
I
mind
said
or
the
not.
Spanish love deception.
Oh, I haven't even heard that. Oh, no, I have heard of it.
Yeah.
Is that a whole is that Ali Hazelwood or is that someone else?
It's
blocked it out.
Selena Armas. Yeah,
Okay.
it's one. They were all out. They all came out around that time. My one was A Little Life. The Hanya
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Gehar.
It's not. Yeah.
Yeah,
A lot of people.
Like-
that.
that's definitely a
people know it.
Marmite book as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I did it as part of a buddy read, and a lot of the people in the buddy read didn't enjoy it, and you know that may or may not have influenced. Do you know the way sometimes that if everybody's kind of not enjoying something, it rubs off on you? I'm not sure if that influenced my feelings on it, but definitely, like, whenever I think of something that I'm like, oh god, I could never read that again, nor in good faith recommend it to someone.
Yeah.
Very well written, but just couldn't put
Yeah.
anyone through it. Like,
I think that's probably
Yeah.
how I felt about 22, actually. After
Okay.
my mini of not reading it. I can
Yeah.
see why people love it, and I can see why
Yeah.
it's considered a modern classic, but it just wasn't for me. Like there were definitely parts that I was like, huh, that's, interesting the way that's written, or I like
Yeah.
his use somewhere there, but at the same time I spent a lot of it just being like, okay, I get it. Like I get it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of intentional misogyny in it as well.
yeah,
Mm.
Intentional that it's used to point out how bad the people who are being misogynistic are. But after a while of reading that as a woman, you're kind of like, uh-huh.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
men's favorite book. Like so many men I know have recommended it to me. I never hear a woman recommending it, which I just think is interesting. But,
That is a very good point.
That is
actually,
interesting.
that's another
Yeah.
one I read as
Yeah.
a teenager, I'd say. So maybe, and like, I don't have any particular feelings either way about it. But
yeah.
yeah,
But I find like that I read loads of books like that as a teenager, like Jack Kerouac and stuff like that. That as a teenager, I thought these were like the classic books that I had to read, because I hadn't read any feminist books yet. And then as I got older, I was like, oh, okay, that's why. Like the people who are recommending them to me are like guys. They're like, you have to read Kerouac. He's amazing. And then you read it and you're like, well, again, not so good on characters. Jack, Beljar, which was like, okay, I should have been reading that instead.
Yeah. But at least you've read now. It's whatever age the realization was. Once you had it, that was the important thing, I suppose. So catch 22, very valid answer to that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad I thought of one there because that would have bothered me otherwise.
No, you're okay.
I think we were kind of
sit up in bed at 3 a.m. just like, oh my God,
we were thinking that it might be, when in that episode of Friends where Phoebe does like North Route, South Route, asking the questions and then you'd subliminally just give your answer.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I paperback actually, because I always think I prefer hardbacks, but maybe it's paperbacks. That's what I say.
Yeah, no, they were pretty instantaneous. Yeah.
You did actually. You answered them quite quickly. Some people deliberate over them a small bit, but no, you were just.
Well, I thought it was the rapid fire buzzer round. So
oh yeah.
Thank you very much, Chloe.
Thanks for coming on, Chloe.
For having me. That was great crack.
Thank you so much for listening to this edition of Another Chapter podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like and share to keep the book conversation going. Thank you to Helen Becerra for the graphics, Mark Neville for the mixing, and to each of our contributors. Music is Make It Work by All Good Folks.
Don't forget to follow along on Instagram at Another Chapter Podcast. We'll see you there.